Alrighty, y'all. I think I'm about ready to go ahead and get started. So for today, we're going to be doing a live reading solo of Hans Hermann Hoppe's Getting Libertarianism Right. Now, for this, he starts off, and I really like we're probably going to do the introduction because this is about a 4-part thing. So so what I want to start off with for this is that Hans, libertarianism, thin libertarianism, as I usually like to call it, is it's a theory that, is theoretically compatible with any walk of life you want to live with, theoretically. Now, for practical reasons, this is in fact not the case, as Hans Hoppe is actually going to describe to us, and over the course of 4 chapters and an introduction. And I think today we will get all the way through the introduction, and next week we will be pretty much going. Oh wow, that's a lot. We might not get all of that done today. This is about 2,700 words, so it's going to take a little while to get through. And I want to start off with this because I think this is a really, really important discussion of why is libertarianism necessarily a right-wing ideology, and why is it actually not compatible with what we call left wing, the left side of reality. Why is it not compatible with leftism, or maybe perhaps not leftism, but why is it not not a left wing identity, a left-wing lifestyle? Why is it not compatible with that? That's the thing I think that's very important, because I think that, where you get this idea that we need to be unified with the left, I think no, because, in fact, we need to be making these more lefty libertarians more right-wing, because this is, I think, because what they believe about behavioral choices and their just lifestyle choices, which are non-aggressive, these are in fact actually very incompatible with a libertarian society. They're just it's not practical to have these sorts of lifestyle choices being permitted, even though they don't violate thin libertarianism or the non-aggression principle. And Hans Hoppe, he's going, when he goes through this is the thing that he's going to be trying to explain to us. And now, Grant, I do this basically the same thing with the archotropism framework, where I can, point out, why the incentives of, left-wing lifestyles naturally will lead to a more, into a more state, or statist society. But, he's going to do this differently. And I really appreciate how he does this, without, does this kind of the hard way, I believe. But I think let's go ahead and get into it. Oh, but before we do that, we have to pay some bills. So we have Paloma Verde CBD. Now, if you have anxiety, you have stress, you have any sort of muscle tension, this stuff, I take it every 2 or 3 times a day. Yeah, actually, I go through these very, very quickly. I go through about one of these about every about once a week and a half. And these are that good. And they, my wife loves them too. But, for me, it's like, because I take a lot of stimulants, I take a lot of nootropics. Some of them, they make me shake. They make me have a little bit of extra anxiety and stress, and they make me feel the stress a little bit more. But I take these as part of my nootropic stack in order to, one, stay smart and to mitigate quite a lot of the, side effects that, the unpleasant side effects of these stimulants. And, of course, all legal, of course, but but this for me is like indispensable to my day. If I don't start taking, CBD in the morning, or, before I go to bed at night, I'm not going to be able to fall asleep, and I'm not going to be able to be as productive. I'm not going to be at my maximum. So I want to tell you about Paloma Verde CBD, because this is indispensable to my daily routine. I take the strawberry lemonade gummies. They're about 10 milligrams of CBD per gummy, which is really, really good. And they taste like a real gummy. Like they really, some of CBD gummies have a weird aftertaste to them. Not this at all. This tastes like a very real gummy, and almost like a gummy bear, and very, very good. And so, I wanted, so if you would like to probably add this to your nootropic stack, assuming you take like a buttload of caffeine, this will help, get rid of some of the caffeine jitters. So if you want to take a Paloma Verde CBD, you can get 25% off any order over $75. That basically gets you two whole packs of these, and they are absolutely worth it. And that will give you 25% off your order plus free shipping. Well worth it. I take these every day. So please help support this show, help support this company. Carlos and Vanessa are very, very good people. They're both here in Texas, so they're good liberty lover people, and they're trying to help support this show. So if you could, and please go help them, use promo code POPULAR, not promo code KING, because that one is bad. That one's going to send you distilled Hillary Clinton urine, and you don't want that. And poor Matt, he drove off a cliff the other day while trying to type in promo code KING, and unfortunately, he became a COVID statistic. He's no longer with us. But anyway, if you would use promo code POPULAR, you will get 25% off your order plus free shipping, over $75, and and you will help support this show. Thank you, and let's get started. All right, so chapter 1, which Hans Hoppe titles "A Realistic Libertarian." It starts with a quote by late Rothbard, the best Rothbard actually. Early Rothbard not so much, but late Rothbard's substantially better. It's from Rothbard in 2000. It says, libertarianism is logically consistent with almost any attitude towards culture, society, religion, or moral principle. In strict logic, libertarian political doctrine can be severed from all other considerations. Logically, one can be, and indeed most libertarians are in fact, hedonists, libertines, immoralists, militant enemies of religion in general and Christianity in particular, and still be consistent adherents of libertarian politics. God, Rothbard is so just hitting it out of the park right off the bat. Or I should say late Rothbard is hitting it out of the park. In fact, in strict logic, one can be consistent devotee of property rights politically and be a moocher, a scamster, a petty crook, and racketeer in practice, as all too many libertarians turn out to be. Strictly logically, one can do these things, but psychologically, sociologically, and in practice, it simply doesn't work that way. Yes, Mark Eigen, Rothbard is but late Rothbard is the base Rothbard. We like this one. We really like this Rothbard. This dude is just absolutely hitting out park. Now that quote is from Murray Rothbard, Big Government Libertarians, and I think he looks like he co-wrote it with Lou Rockwell in 2000. So late Rothbard. This dude is excellent. So now this turns to Hans Hoppe writing. Let me begin with a few remarks on libertarianism as a pure deductive theory. If there were no scarcity in the world, human conflicts would be impossible. Interpersonal conflicts are always and everywhere conflicts concerning scarce things. This is the idea that all wars are trade wars, pretty much. And I want to do X with a given thing, and you want to do Y with the same thing. Because such conflicts, and because we are able to communicate and argue with each other, we seek out norms of behavior with the purpose of avoiding these conflicts. The purpose of norms is conflict avoidance. If we did not want to avoid conflicts, the search for norms of conduct would be senseless. We would simply fight and struggle. Absent a perfect harmony of all interest conflicts, conflicts regarding scarce resources can only be avoided if all scarce resources are assigned as private, exclusive property to some specified individual. Only then can I act independently with my own things from you and your own things, without you and me coming into conflict. But who owns what scarce resources as his private property and who does not? First, Each person owns his physical body that only he and no one else controls directly. I can control your body indirectly by first directly controlling my body and vice versa. And that only he directly controls. Also, in particular, when discussing and arguing the question at hand. Otherwise, if body ownership were assigned to some indirect body controller, conflict would become unavoidable, as the direct body controller cannot give up his direct control over his body as long as he is alive. And in particular, otherwise, it would be impossible that any two persons, as the contenders in any property dispute, could ever argue and debate the question whose will is to prevail. Since arguing and debating presupposes that both the proponent and the opponent have exclusive control over their respective bodies, and so come to the correct judgment on their own without a fight in a conflict-free form of interaction. And second, as for scarce resources that can be controlled only indirectly, that must be appropriated with our own nature-given, i.e., unappropriated body. Exclusive control property, in quotes, in parentheses, I should say, property is acquired by and assigned to that person who appropriated the resource in question first, or who acquired it through voluntary conflict-free exchange from its previous owner. For only the first appropriator of a resource and all later owners connected to him through a chain of voluntary exchanges can possibly acquire and gain control over it without conflict, peacefully, or i.e. peacefully. Otherwise, if exclusive control is assigned to latecomers, conflict is not avoided, but contrary to the very purpose of the norms made unavoidable and permanent. Let me emphasize that I consider this theory as essentially irrefutable, as a priori true. In my estimation, this theory represents one of the greatest, if not the greatest, achievement of all social thought. It formulates and codifies the immutable ground rules for all people, everywhere, who wish to live together in peace. What Hoppe is essentially saying here is he's figured out how to cross, I think, the is-ought gap. Like, okay, for a long time, this was a problem in philosophy where people were say, okay, well, you should be the one who owns your body, but in fact, do you? Because somebody else can come over and just control you. And so people didn't know how to cross that gap. And what Hoppe's just done here is said that, well, because, in the sense of arguing, because you are arguing in the first place, you are, the natural assumption there is that you do. So basically you can, he figured out how to cross this gap and prove that, a priori, that you definitely do own your body, and it's assumed in the fact that you're able to argue. And so where he's, this is where he takes this yet as so we ended with this is immutable ground rules for everyone who wishes to live in peace. So, and yet this theory does not tell us very much about real life. To be sure, it tells us all that actual societies, insofar as they are characterized by peaceful relations, adhere, whether consciously or subconsciously, to these rules and are thus guided by rational insight. But it does not tell us to what extent this is the case, nor does it tell us, even if adherence to these rules were complete, how people actually live together. It does not tell us, how close or distant from each other that they live, if, when, and how frequent and long, and for what purposes they meet and interact. To use an analogy here, knowing libertarian theory, the rules of peaceful interactions is like knowing the rules of logic, the rules of correct thinking and reasoning. However, just like the knowledge of logic, as indispensable as it is for correct thinking, it does not tell us anything about how actual human thought, about actual words, concepts, arguments, inferences, and conclusions used and made. So the logic of peaceful Interaction, i.e. libertarianism, does not tell us anything about actual human life and action. Hence, just as every logician who wants to make good use of his knowledge must turn his attention to real thought and reasoning, so a libertarian theorist must turn his attention to the actions of real people. Instead of being a mere theorist, he must also become a sociologist and psychologist and take account of empirical social reality. The world as it really is. Shots fired indeed. Oh boy, did Nick Blanchard, yeah. Boy, did he just fire some shots at a certain caucus that shall not be named. He said, it's not enough to understand theory and to preach theory. You actually have to, take account of empirical reality in this. And that this is I think this is indispensable for this discussion of, is libertarianism a right-wing ideology? Yes, in fact it is, and this is provable. So when they say there's no difference between left and right, the proper libertarian response to the assertion by Lulberts that there is no difference between left and right is that the difference between libertarianism, the difference between left and right is the right is libertarian and the left is not. That's the proper, and by the way, most of them are very bad at it, but the right is compatible with libertarianism and the left is not. That is the number one difference. But and why they're not two sides of the same bird. They're not two wings of the same bird. That's just fundamentally false, as Hoppe is about to prove to us. So Hoppe goes on. This brings me to the topic of left and right. The difference between the right and the left, as Paul Gottfried has often noted, is a fundamental disagreement concerning an empirical question. The right recognizes as a matter of fact the existence of individual human differences and diversities and accepts them as natural, whereas the left denies the existence of such differences and diversities, or tries to explain them away, and in any case regards them as something unnatural that must be rectified to establish the natural human state of equality. The right recognizes the existence of individual human differences, not just with regard to physical location and makeup of the human environment and of the individual human body, its height, its strength, weight, age, gender, skin, hair, eye color, facial features, etc., etc. More importantly, the right also recognizes the existence of difference in the mental makeup of people, i.e. their cognitive abilities, talents, psychological dispositions, and motivations. It recognizes the existence of bright and dull, smart and dumb, short and farsighted, busy and lazy, aggressive and peaceful, docile and inventive, impulsive and patient, scrupulous and careless people, etc., etc. The right recognizes that these mental differences resulting from the interaction of the physical environment and the physical human body are the results of both environmental and physiological and biological factors. The right further recognizes that the people are tied together or separated, by both physically in geographical space and emotionally by blood, biological commonalities and relationships, by language and religion, as well as by customs and traditions. Moreover, the right is not merely recognizes the existence of these differences and diversities. It realizes also that the outcome of input differences will again be different and result in people with much or little property, in rich and poor, and in people of high or low social status, rank, influence, or authority. And it accepts that these different outcomes of different inputs as normal and natural. God, he's wordy, but he's getting it right. Because the right accepts that these differences, one, they exist, and two, there's no correcting them. You can, if you'd made everything equal in the next instant, it would all become unequal. because we're all we're all different. We can't be in the same location. We can't be in the same bodies. We're not the same, and there's nothing that can be done to to account for that. And so basically what he's arguing here is that the right is based on truth, and they're based on and their worldview is based on just facts of reality. And what he's about to argue is that leftism has to be based on lies, and there's no sense in which a lifestyle or a bunch of choices that are based on lies are compatible with libertarianism. That just cannot be the case. And let's see how he describes the left. The left, on the other hand, is convinced of the fundamental equality of men, that all men are created equal. It does not deny the patently obvious, of course, that there are environmental and physiological differences, i.e., that some people live in the mountains and others on the seaside, or that some men are tall and others short, some are white and others black, some male and others female, etc. But the left does deny the existence of mental differences, or insofar as these are too apparent to be entirely denied, it tries to explain them away as accidental. That is, the left either explains such differences as solely environmentally determined, such that a change in environmental circumstances, moving a person from the mountains to the seaside or vice versa, for instance, or giving each person identical pre and postnatal attention would produce, an equal outcome. And it denies that these differences are caused also by comparatively intractable biological factors. Now, what he's saying right here is that the left effectively believes that, in tabula rasa, that the people are a blank slate, and this is just not the case. We are not blank slates, and and they believe that if you are just give humans the same exact inputs, that they will turn out the same exact way. And in this sense, they're actually denying the existence of individuality and the existence of choices. They're denying basically that people exist, that we are individuals. And so right off the bat, Hoppe has singled in on something that is fundamentally incompatible with libertarianism. That is this idea that humans are deterministic and tabula rasa. We are not. And the left's attempts to make us so are just their worldview that we should be equal is just fundamentally wrong. It's all based on lies, and that cannot be compatible with libertarianism. Now let's see. Or he continues, or else in those cases where it cannot be denied that biological factors play a causal role in determining success or failure in life, in parentheses, money and fame, such as when a 5-foot tall man cannot win the Olympic gold medal in the 100-meter dash, or a fat and ugly girl cannot become Miss Universe, the left considers these differences as pure luck and resulting outcome of individual success or failure as undeserved. In any case, whether caused by advantageous or disadvantageous environmental circumstances or biological attributes, all observable human differences are to be equalized. And where this cannot be done literally, as we cannot move mountains and seas, or make a tall man short or a black man white, the left insists that the undeservedly lucky must compensate the unlucky, so that every person will be accorded an equal station in life in correspondence with the natural equality of all men. And, right there, the goals of the left are fundamentally incompatible with libertarianism, because they believe this must be the case. Now, and if you apply human liberty, obviously we're all going to make different choices based on different means and different goals and different ends and different preferences. And so, by nature, libertarianism will result in the natural hierarchy that the right believes in, and will result in the antithesis of what the left believes in. And this is fundamentally problematic. So right off the bat, their fundamental beliefs about reality and their fundamental goals are absolutely incompatible with the means of liberty. So if you have the means of liberty as a goal, or even the output, or as a, there is no sense in which that is compatible with the left. It just can't be. Because it will absolutely lead to the exact opposite of what they want. Therefore, they don't believe in liberty, and they don't believe in the rights of the individual. They believe that all of these are collective rights. And actually, let me share my screen. I am sorry, people. I should have done that immediately. That was retarded of me. There we go. That's better. Now let me zoom in on this a little bit, because this was silly of me not to do this immediately. I should have done this right off the start. Wow, I'm dumb. Alrighty. So let me see if I can do it like this. No, I can't. All right, we'll do it that way. With this short character, he continues. With this short characterization of the right and left, I return to the subject of libertarianism. Is libertarian theory compatible with the worldview of the right? And, is libertarianism compatible with leftist views? As for the right, the answer is an emphatic yes. Every libertarian only vaguely familiar with social reality will have no difficulty in acknowledging the fundamental truth of the rightist worldview. He can, and in light of the empirical evidence, indeed must agree with the right's empirical claim regarding the fundamental, not only physical, but mental inequality of man. And he can in particular also agree with the right's normative claim of laissez-faire, i.e., that this human inequality will inevitably result also in unequal outcomes, and that nothing can or should be done about this. There is only one important caveat, however. While the right may accept all human inequalities, whether of starting points or of outcomes, as natural, the libertarian would insist that only those inequalities are natural and should not be interfered with that have come into existence by following ground rules of peaceful interaction mentioned at the beginning. Inequalities that are the result of violations of these rules, however, do require corrective action and should be eliminated. And moreover, the libertarian would insist that, as a matter of empirical fact, there exist quite a few among the innumerable observable human inequalities that are the result of such rule violations, such as rich men who owe their fortune not to hard work, foresight, entrepreneurial talent, or else a voluntary gift or inheritance, but to robbery, fraud, or state-granted monopolistic privilege. The corrective action required in such cases, however, is not motivated by egalitarianism, but by a desire for restitution. He and only he who can show that he has been robbed, defrauded, or legally disadvantaged should be made whole again by those and only those who have committed the crimes against him and his property, including cases where restitution would result in an even greater inequality, as when a poor man has been defrauded and owes restitution to a rich one, which is that's a big point. It's like not many in the LP are going to agree with that. When you're that you're actually going to disadvantage someone who is already at a disadvantage if they do something wrong. A lot of people in the LP would not agree with that. They believe that they believe fundamentally in this lie, this leftist lie of equality, and the yeah, sorry about that, Mark. I should have done that right from the outset. That was a oversight on my part, as don't do these readings all that often. But I definitely will not make that a mistake next time. Now, Hoppe continues. On the other hand, as for the left, the answer is an emphatic no. The empirical claim of the left that there is no significant mental differences between individuals and, by implication, between various groups of people, and that what appear to be such differences are due solely to environmental factors and would disappear if only the environment were equalized, is contradicted by everyday life experience and mountains of empirical social research. Men are not and cannot be made equal, and whatever one tries in this regard, inequalities will always reemerge. However, it is in particular the implied normative claim and the activist agenda of the left that makes them utterly incompatible with libertarianism. The leftist goal of equalizing everyone or equalizing everyone's station in life is incompatible with private property, whether in one's body or in external things. Instead of peaceful cooperation, it brings about unending conflict and leads to the decidedly unegalitarian, establishment of a permanent ruling class, lording it over the rest of the people as their material to be equalized. Since, as Murray Rothbard has formulated it, no two people are uniform or equal in any sense in nature or in the outcomes of a voluntary society, to bring about and maintain such equality necessarily requires the permanent imposition of a power elite armed with devastating coercive power. And I think this is why I always say this idea of left libertarianism is fundamentally a lie. It doesn't exist, or it's a contradiction in terms. Now, you can have people who are just fundamentally irrational, and this is how I regard left libertarianism, as fundamentally irrational. That you're saying you want voluntary stateless equality, and it's like okay, you got to pick one of those. Is not and usually they will pick state. They want the equality and will pick statecraft with it. Whether by formal demand, regular demand, or by pseudo demand. One of the two, and that's coming from my archotropism framework. That that bottom left quadrant actually has a demand circuit that's pointed straight up at the left wing authoritarian quadrant. On that 4-quadrant chart, that if you're in the kind of libertarian chaos or stateless chaos, that's naturally going to evolve itself, whether by formal demand or by pseudo demand, into left-wing authoritarianism. Has to, and that's simply, and if not by formal demand, then definitely by pseudo demand. Because so whenever you have the left saying, oh well, we have a left libertarianism and we need to be unified with it or whatever, it's like, buddy, no, we don't. Because their lifestyle choices, their views on equality are fundamentally incompatible with what we want, what the actual goals of a libertarian society are. It just cannot be. These are diametrically opposed to each other. And so there, Hoppe continues, there exist countless individual human differences, and there exist even more differences between different groups of individuals. Since each individual can be fit into countless different groups, it is the power elite that determines which of these differences, whether individuals or of groups, is to count as advantageous and lucky, or disadvantageous and unlucky, or else as irrelevant. It is the power elite that determine how, out of countless possible ways, to actually do the equalizing of the lucky and the unlucky, i.e., what and how much to take from the lucky and give, to the unlucky in order to achieve equality. In particular, it is the power elite, by defining itself as unlucky, that determines, what and how much to take from the lucky and keep for itself. And whatever equalization is then achieved, since countless new differences and inequalities are constantly reemerging, the equalizing job of the power elites can never come to a natural end, but must instead go on forever endlessly. This is, something I've pointed out a lot, is that the left will like to use victimhood as a pretense for aggression. And that's exactly what this is saying here, is that, because I'm unlucky, because I'm a victim of circumstance, therefore I have a right to aggression. And now this as an adaptive fiction is very compatible with a democracy that, or especially with a power elite that really wants to, have a, job permanence. It wants job security. So is it going to pick the ideology that makes its if you assume that these differences are all natural and they're good, that is not a belief system that actively promotes right wing, that actively promotes the state. So this is why, right wing monarchy has actually, in my terms of my archetypism framework, right-wing authoritarianism naturally has a demand circuit downward towards libertarianism, because the idea that these hierarchical differences are normal and natural and good, that actually, that ideology by itself, is going to say that, okay, then allowing these inequalities to proliferate is, by means of human liberty, this is naturally going to demand more liberty, because that's what makes these inequalities proliferate. And see, from there you have, a demand. So now we, in terms of my archetypism framework, we have on the left side, you have, we've already established that left-wing libertarians are fundamentally irrational. There is no sense in which this is a rational standpoint, but of course, irrational people will always exist. And, but if you're in that bottom left quadrant, there are not just one, but two actual demand functions that point upward to that left-wing authoritarianism. But here, what we see is that these if you're in the right, these right-wing like authoritarianism, that actually has a natural demand circuit that's pointed downward, towards libertarianism. So or towards a right-wing libertarian spontaneous order. And that's because, again, the idea of equality, it's necessary to having a perpetual job security for the elites. Whereas if you don't believe in equality, that is not a recipe for job security. So, and by the way, that's why these, our elites are naturally egalitarian. They want job security. It's all their incentive. So, Hoppe continues. The egalitarian worldview of the left is not only incompatible with with libertarianism, however, it is so out of touch with reality that one must wonder how anyone can take it seriously. The man on the street certainly does not believe in the equality of all men. Plain common sense and sound prejudice stand in the way of that. And I am even more confident that no one knows the actual proponents of the egalitarian doctrine really deep down believe what he proclaims. Yet, then how could the leftist worldview have become the dominant ideology of our age? At least for a libertarian, the answer should be obvious. The egalitarian doctrine of this status, not because it is true, but because it provides the perfect intellectual cover for the drive towards totalitarian social control by a ruling elite. The ruling elite, therefore, should enlist the help of the intelligentsia or the chattering class. It was put on the payroll or otherwise subsidized, and in return, it delivered the desired egalitarian message, which it knows to be wrong, yet which is enormously beneficial to its own employment prospects. And so, the most enthusiastic proponents of egalitarian nonsense can be found among the intellectual class. This is, there he is saying exactly what I just told you, that this idea of equality is an adaptive fiction. It's adopted by the power elites as a form of job security for them, and this, and it's actually fundamentally untrue. So again, when you have this idea that we're going to have spontaneous equality in your bottom left quadrant, this naturally will evolve itself into a power class, into left-wing authoritarianism, whether by voluntary means or by involuntary means, whether by demand or by pseudo demand. And so, I mean, I see this right here as absolutely a nail in the coffin to the idea of like left-wing libertarianism, or the idea that we should be friends with the left at all. Like, if we should not even be reaching out to them. They're the enemy, fundamentally the enemy. I don't understand this Tulsi worship. I do not understand the worship of guys like Jimmy Dore or anything like that just because they're anti-war. That's not worth it to me. To me, they're fundamentally wrong on everything, and they happen to get it right on war sometimes, which is kind of ironic because war is one of the only things that actually leads to not natural, but unnatural human equality, because you destroy everything and now you make rich and poor equally poor. So that's the function of war. Natural disasters, the only thing that gives you natural equality, or as I call them, spontaneous equality events. But equality itself is not natural, as Hoppe has just proven, and the only reason it's here, or as the only reason it's pushed, is because the power elite benefit from it. He says, given then that libertarianism and the egalitarianism professed by the left are obviously incompatible, it must come as a surprise, and it is testimony to the immense ideological power of the ruling elites and their court intellectuals that many who call themselves libertarian today are and consider themselves to be part of the left. How is such a thing possible? What ideologically unifies these left libertarians is their active promotion of various anti-discrimination policies and their advocacy of a policy free and non-discriminatory immigration. It's like, yeah, where have we heard that one before? Yeah, the LP, exactly. Yeah, he just said it. These are basically ruling class libertarians. These are big government libertarians. So whenever you hear the LP is like, oh, we're here to oppose state power, not by equality, you're not. If you are for equality, if you're for like anti-discrimination or whatever you want to call it, because that's just fundamentally a lie, that you are in fact supporting big government ideology. Or you are supporting an ideology that naturally leads to demand for bigger and bigger government. So this comes as no surprise to me as a critic of the LP that they are actually on the side of big government. And to the extent that the Mises Caucus is trying to change that, good on them. And to the extent that they're not, well, okay, whatever. These libertarians, noted Rothbard, are fervently committed to the notion, while each individual might not be equal to every other, that every conceivable group, ethnic contingent, race, gender, or in some cases species, are in fact and must be made equal, that each one has rights that must not be subject to curtailment by any form of discrimination. But how is it possible to reconcile this anti-discrimination stand with private property, which all libertarians are supposed to regard as the cornerstone of their philosophy, and which, after all, means exclusive property, and hence logically implies discrimination? The answer is you're not supposed to reconcile that, because the Libertarian Party, does not, or these left libertarians, they do not exist to actually promote libertarianism. They're just cover for the left. Now, and if you notice with the LP, and Dave pointed this out on his show recently, that whenever you try to get the LP to oppose lockdowns or mandates or whatever, they drag their feet. They don't want to do it because they understand just instinctively that these lockdowns and mandates are promoting equality. And I don't think it's conscious on their part, but I think they, somewhere subconscious in them, they want equality, and they recognize that the mandates and lockdowns are providing that. Now, granted, it's equal poverty, but that doesn't matter to them. these are leftists, masquerading as libertarians. And but whenever they, like with this, this NFL coach like Gruden or something like that, when he says like 10-year-old emails of him saying cringy things that, again, I don't approve of, but, he said them. But, like they are like day one, they are right there ready to condemn it in the harshest of terms. And because this is something they fundamentally believe in. They fundamentally believe in equality. And, that's what actually motivates them. They're not, these are not good actors, and you can tell by their behaviors what they feel their incentives are. They feel like their incentives are to promote equality, not to promote liberty. And if that means promoting big government or promoting an ideology that in turn promotes big government, these so-called libertarians are fine with that. And he continues, traditional leftists, of course, do not have this problem. They do not think or care about private property. Since everyone is equal to everyone else, the world and everything on it and in it belongs to everyone equally. All property is common property. And as an equal co-owner of the world, everyone has, of course, an equal right to access to everywhere and everything. Absent a perfect harmony of all interests, however, you cannot have everyone have equal property and equal access to everything and everywhere without leading to permanent conflict. Thus, to avoid this predicament, it is necessary to institute a state, i.e., a territorial monopolist of ultimate decision-making. Common property, that is, requires a state and is to become state property. It is the state that ultimately determines not just who owns what, and is also the state then that ultimately determines the spatial allocation of all people, who is to live where and allowed to meet and have access to whom, and private property be damned. After all, it is they, the lefties, who would control the state. No shit. Boy, is this guy spitting fire. But this escape route is not open to anyone calling himself a libertarian. He must take private property seriously. I might disagree with Hoppe there that one who calls himself a libertarian must take private property seriously. No, this is in fact not what we observe. That in fact people call themselves a libertarian are just liars. A lot of them are just liars, and they're either irrational, which is okay. That's always going to be a fact of reality, that some humans are just fundamentally irrational, and or they're just using private property as a excuse whenever it serves the left, like how the LP will defend corporate interests and corporate discrimination against right wingers, but only because, again, these are left wingers. They don't mind discrimination against the right. They mind discrimination that harms the left. And whereas he continues, psychologically or sociologically, the attraction of non-discrimination policies to libertarians can be explained by the fact that an over proportionally large number of libertarians are misfits, or simply odd, or to use Rothbard's description, hedonists, libertines, immoralists, militant enemies of religion, moochers, scamsters, and petty crooks and racketeers. God, I love late Rothbard. Oh my God. It's like, I think that, I'm going to, make I'm probably going to refer to this every single time I hear about the LP now on. I'm going to refer to them as a party of hedonists, libertines, immoralists, militant enemies of religion, moochers, scamsters, petty crooks, and racketeers. Because God, is this guy nailing it? Oh my God. Yep, he continues, who became attracted to libertarianism because of its alleged tolerance towards misfits and outliers, and who now want to use it as a vehicle to free themselves from all discrimination, typically in everyday life, dished out to their likes. But how do they do it logically? Left libertarians, bleeding heart libertarians, and humanitarian cosmopolitan libertarians are not simply leftists. They know of the central importance of private property, yet how they can seemingly logically reconcile the notion of private property with their promotion of anti-discrimination policies, and in particular, their propagation of a policy of discrimination-free immigration. The short answer is in placing all current private property and its distribution among distinct people under moral suspicion. With this claim, left libertarians fall into the opposite error from that committed by the non-libertarian right. As indicated, the non-libertarian right commits the error of regarding all, or at least almost all, current property holdings, including in particular also the property holdings of the state, as natural and just. In distinct opposition, a libertarian would recognize and insist that some present property holdings and all or at least most state holdings are demonstrably unnatural and unjust. As such, require restitution and compensation. In reverse, the left libertarians claim that not only all or most state holdings are unnatural and unjust. From this admission, they derive their title libertarian, but that also all or most private property holdings are unnatural and unjust. And in support of this, in support for this latter claim, they point to the fact that all current private property holdings and their distribution among various people have been affected, altered, and distorted by private state action and legislation, and that everything would be different and no one would be in the same place and position he currently is had it not been for such prior state interferences. Without any doubt, this observation is correct. The state in its long history has made some people richer and others poorer than they would have been otherwise. It killed some people and let others survive. It moved people around from one place to another. It promoted some professions, industries, or regions and prevented or delayed and changed the development of others. It awarded some people with privileges and monopolies and legally discriminated against and disadvantaged others, and on and on. The list of past injustices of winners and losers, perpetrators and victims is endless. But from this indisputable fact, it does not follow that all or most current property holdings are morally suspect and are in need of rectification. To be sure, state property must be restituted because it has been unjustly acquired. It should be returned to its natural owners, i.e. the people or their heirs who were coerced to fund such public property by surrendering parts of their own private property to the state. However, I will not concern myself with this particular privatization issue here. He does this again in, what was it? It actually has a footnote right there, but he also does this in his What Must Be Done lecture, which, by the way, if you haven't listened to it, you should absolutely go listen to it. The show that Matt Erickson and Pete Canones and I did on What Must Be Done, because this is, he just nails it there again. Hoppe always nails it, but anyway. Rather, it is the further reaching claim that past injustices also render all current private property holdings morally suspect, which does not follow and which is certainly not true. As a matter of fact, most private holdings are likely just irrespective of their history, unless and except in such cases where a specific claimant can prove that they are not. The burden of proof, however, is on whoever challenges the current property holdings and distribution. He must show that he is in possession of an older title to the property in question than its current owner. Otherwise, if a claimant cannot prove this, everything is to remain as it currently is. Or, to be more specific and realistic, from the fact that Peter and Paul or their parents, as members of any conceivable group of people, had been murdered, displaced, robbed, assaulted, or illegally discriminated against in the past, and their current property holdings and social positions would have been different if it had not been for such past injustices. It does not follow that any present member of this group has a just claim for compensation against current property of anyone else, nor from within, nor from outside his group. Rather, in each case, Peter or Paul would have to show, in one case after another, that he personally has a better claim because he has an older title to some specified piece of property, than some current named identified owner and alleged perpetrator. What he's saying here is basically that you're just because black people were discriminated against in the past does not mean that any black person alive today can have a claim against any random white person or something like that. Basically, you have to have a specific injustice that was done by a specific person that violated your property rights, and that is where you can draw restitution from. But just saying yes, you, and again, you have to show that you have a claim of ownership on that. That's what he means by title. It's a claim of ownership. So, certainly a considerable number of cases exist where this can be done and restitution or compensation is owed. But just as certainly, with this burden of proof on any challenger, of any current property distribution, not much mileage can be gained for any non-discriminatory egalitarian agenda. To the contrary, in contemporary Western world, replete with affirmative action laws that award legal privileges to protected groups at the expense of various other correspondingly unprotected and discriminated groups, more, not less, discrimination and inequalities would result if, as justice would require, everyone who in fact could provide such individualized proof of his victimization was actually permitted to do so by a state and bring suit and seek redress from his victimizer. But left libertarians, the bleeding heart and humanitarian cosmopolitan libertarians, are not exactly known as fighters against affirmative action. Rather, and quite to the contrary, in order to reach the conclusion that they want to reach, they relax or dispense altogether with the requirement for someone claiming victimhood or offering individualized proof of victimization. Typically, in order to maintain their intellectual status as libertarians, the left libertarians do so quietly, surreptitiously, or even unknowingly. But in effect, in giving up this fundamental requirement of justice, they replace private property and property rights and rights violations with the muddled notion of civil rights and civil rights violations, and individual rights with group rights, and thus become closet socialists. Gosh, not bad. It sounds about right. That's about how I view the LP. They are a bunch of closet socialists. And gosh, I don't know how anyone can really deny that. I mean, it's absolutely what we observe with them. That this is in fact, in fact, they see their incentives as leading towards egalitarianism, and that's what they want. They see and they behave those incentives, with quite a lot of happiness and giddiness, if anything. Given that, and Hoppe continues. Given that the state has disturbed and distorted all private property holdings and distributions, yet without the requirement of individualized proof of victimization, everyone and every imaginable group can easily and without too much intellectual effort claim somehow victimhood vis-a-vis anyone else or any other group. Relieved of the burden of individualized proof of victimhood, left libertarians are essentially unrestricted in their discovery of new victims and victimizers, in accordance with their own presupposed egalitarian assumptions. To their credit, they recognize the state as an institutional victimizer and invader of private property rights. Again, from this derives their claim to be libertarians. But they see far more institutional and structural injustices and social distortions, far more victims and victimizers, and far more need for restitution, compensation, and attendant property redistribution in the current world than only those injustices and distortions committed and caused by the state, to be resolved and rectified by shrinking and ultimately dismantling and privatizing all state holdings and functions. Even if the state were dismantled, they hold, as late and lasting effects of its long prior existence, or of certain pre-state conditions, other institutional distortions would remain in place that required rectification to create a just society. Again, this is the idea that leftists use victimhood, alleged victimhood, as a pretense for aggression. That's what this is saying right here, is that they are all going out looking for victims and victimizers in order to try to promote their egalitarian agenda. The views held by left libertarians in this regard are not entirely uniform, but they typically differ little from those promoted by cultural Marxists. They assume as natural, without much, if any, empirical support, and indeed against overwhelming evidence to the contrary, that a largely flat or horizontal society of equals, i.e., essentially universally and worldwide homogenous, like-minded and talented people of more or less similar social and economic status and standing, and they regard all systematic deviations from this model as the result of discrimination and grounds for some form of compensation and restitution. Accordingly, the hierarchical structure of traditional families, of sex roles, and of the partition of labor between males and females is considered unnatural. Indeed, all social hierarchies and vertical rank orders of authority, of headsmen and clan chiefs, of patrons, nobles, aristocrats, and kings, of bishops and cardinals, of bosses generally, and of their respective underlings and subordinates are viewed with suspicion. Similarly, all great or excessive disparities of income and wealth, of so-called economic power, and the existence of both a downtrodden underclass as well as an upper class of super wealthy people and families are deemed unnatural. As well, large industrial and financial corporations and conglomerates are considered artificial creatures of the state, and also suspect, unnatural, and in need of repair are exclusive associations, societies, congregations, churches, and clubs, and all territorial segregation, separation, and secession, whether based on class, gender, race, ethnicity, lineage, language, religion, profession, interest, customs, or tradition. And from this vantage point, the victim groups and their victimizers are easily identified. As it turns out, victims make up the vast majority of mankind. Everyone and every conceivable group is a victim, except that small part of mankind composed of white, including Northern Asian, heterosexual males living traditional bourgeois family lives. They, and especially the most creative and successful ones among them, excluding, interestingly, only rich sports and entertainment celebrities, are the victimizers of everyone else. And again, I think this part right here, is exactly what reveals the left libertarians for who they really are. Is that they're behaving, their incentives, again, their felt incentives from their heart of hearts are towards equality, not liberty. And when you have groups of like rich sports fans, or not fans, but sports actors or entertainment celebrities, sports celebrities or entertainment celebrities, these are traditionally groups that are very, very far to the left. And so therefore, in supporting these sorts of celebrities, what they're actually doing is behaving their incentives because they see them as allies, and that's why they don't go after them. And it really is telling, because if you have someone on the right, they usually hate Hollywood, and they usually don't like your Colin Kaepernicks or whoever, because, again, they see them as enemies. The right behaves the same exact incentive in reverse, where they recognize that these groups are enemies and they hate them. Whereas the left will recognize these groups as natural allies. And again, left libertarians being kind of a contradiction in terms, they really are just leftists, who don't want to call themselves that. They naturally, again, but their incentives kind of reveal them for who they are. They are just plain leftists. They're not they're not real libertarians. And their admiration, or I should say their exclusion of sports celebrities and entertainment celebrities from the victimizer category really shows them for who they are. While this view of human liberty strikes one as bizarre in light of the amazing civilizational achievements originating from precisely this minority group of victimizers, it coincides almost completely with the victimology also propagated by Marxists. Shocker. Yeah, again, people behave their incentives. You either have a left-wing set of incentives or a right-wing set of incentives. Right-wing sets of incentives, create natural demand for spontaneous order. Left-wing incentives naturally create a demand for left-wing authoritarianism. There is no other way around that. Again, that's from the archotropism framework, which is not mentioned here, of course. But when the left, but of course, of course, they're not going to. Their incentives of the left libertarians, so-called, are not going to differ at all from those of the Marxists, and that's why they behave the same way. Both groups only differ on the cause of this similarly identified, described, and deplored structural state of victimization. For the cultural Marxists, the cause for this state of affairs is private property and unbridled capitalism based on private property rights. For them, excuse me. For them, the answer of how to repair damage done is clear and easy. All necessary restitution, compensation, and redistribution are to be done by the state, which they presumably control. For left libertarians, this answer does not work. They are supposed to be in favor of private property and the privatization of state property. They cannot have the state do the restitution, because as libertarians, they are supposed to dismantle and ultimately abolish the state. Yet they want more restitution than only that resulting from the privatization of the so-called public property. Abolishing the state is not enough for them to create a just society. More is needed to compensate the just mentioned huge majority of victims. And Hoppe's making the same point here. Left libertarianism is functionally irrational. Because its goals are completely at odds with what a libertarian society would be like. But what, and on what grounds? Whenever there is individualized proof of victimization, i.e., if some person, A, can be demonstrated that another person, B, had invaded or taken A's property, or vice versa, no problem exists. The case is clear, but absent any such proof, what else is it that the victimizers owe their victims, and on what grounds? How to determine, who owes whom, how much, and of what, and how to implement this restitution scheme in the absence of state, and without thereby trampling on someone else's private property rights. This poses the central intellectual problem for any self-styled left libertarian. Not surprisingly, the answer given by them to this challenge turns out to be evasive and vague. From all I can gather, it amounts to little more than an exhortation. As a keen observer of the intellectual scene has summarized it, be nice. More precisely, you small group of victimizers must always be especially nice, forgiving, and inclusive vis-a-vis all members of the vast majority of victims. The long familiar list of everyone except white heterosexual males, and Asian ones, and as for enforcement, all victimizers not demonstrating proper respect to some victim class member, i.e. victimizers, who are nasty, unforgiving, or exclusive, or who say nasty or disrespectful things to them must be publicly shunned, humiliated, and shamed into obedience. At first sight or hearing, this proposal of how to do restitution may, as can be expected, coming from nice people, appear to be well-meaning, harmless, and plain nice. In fact, however, it is anything but nice and harmless advice. It is wrong and dangerous. First off, why should anyone be particularly nice to anyone else, apart from respecting one's respective private property rights in certain specified physical means, goods? To be nice is a deliberate action and takes an effort, like all actions do. There are opportunity costs. The same effort could also be put towards other effects. Indeed, many, if not most, of our activities are conducted alone and in silence, without any direct interaction with others. As when we prepare our meal, drive our car, or read and write, time devoted to niceness to others is time lost to do other possibly more worthwhile things. Moreover, niceness must be warranted. Why should I be nice to people who are nasty to me? Niceness must be deserved. Indiscriminating niceness diminishes and ultimately extinguishes the distinction between meritorious and faulty conduct. Too much niceness will be given to undeserving people and too little to deserving ones, and the overall level of nastiness will consequently rise, and public life will become increasingly unpleasant. Gee, where have we seen that? That's where we got cancel culture from. You had such an overwhelming, niceness and forgivingness to, bad actors that basically only encourages the bad people to be worse. Because again, this is why I always say you should not respond to evil with peace, because that only encourages evil to proliferate. You should absolutely respond to it with, hostility. Moreover, there are genuinely evil people who do real evil things to private property owners, most importantly, the ruling elites in charge of the state apparatus. As every libertarian would have to admit, one surely has no obligation to be nice to them. And yet, in rewarding the vast majority of victims with extra love and care and attention, one accomplishes precisely this. Less time and effort is devoted to exhibiting nasty behavior towards those who actually are most deserving of it. The power of the state will not be weakened by universal niceness, but strengthened. Yeah, like I always say, do not make peace with evil. That only encourages the evil to proliferate and get substantially more evil. And why is it, in particular, the small minority of white heterosexual males, and especially its most successful members, that owe some extra kindness to the vast majority of all other people? Why not the other way around? After all, if most, if not all, technical inventions, machines, tools, gadgets, and in current use everywhere and anywhere, originated with them. I can't read all of that. I don't want to get canceled. Too bad. Oh well. All other people, by and large, only imitated what they invented and constructed first. All others inherited the knowledge embodied in the inventor's products for free. And isn't it the typical hierarchical family household of a father, mother, and their common children and prospective heirs and their bourgeois conduct and lifestyle, i.e., everything the left disparages and maligns, that is the economically most successful model of social organization the world has ever seen, with the greatest accumulation of capital goods, wealth, and the highest average standard of living? And isn't it only on account of great economic achievements of this minority of victimizers that steadily increasing number of victims could be integrated and partake in the advantages of the worldwide network of the division of labor? And isn't it only that on account of the success of the traditional white bourgeois family model, also so-called alternative lifestyles could all emerge and be sustained over time? Do do not most of today's victims then literally owe their lives, and their current living to the achievements of their alleged victimizers? What's interesting, here is, when he's talking about the family, because this is actually, I'm probably gonna have to do an episode with, Matt Erickson on this eventually, that, like, of the family unit, because, the family unit its incentives are structured absolutely perfectly. And if you simply, obey these incentives instead of being selfish, you will naturally end up with a low time preference civilized society. And if you depart from them, you will necessarily end up with a very uncivilized society. And so, to the extent that, they're actually doing the right thing, this is actually something that makes the traditional families most successful. Again, two incomes providing for children, and one, you can each scratch each other's back and make sure that, pull the slack for each other when something goes wrong. This is it's a perfect set of incentives that naturally will result in more civilization and more production of everything, or more production of everything good. And when, these, alternative lifestyles, the reason they're it's, I mean, that's I would call them degenerate lifestyles, because they literally degenerate society back down into barbarianism and scarcity. And that, by increasing scarcity, again, this is something we talked about, way up at the top, that scarcity is the source of all conflict. So any actions that move you closer to scarcity are necessarily, leading you towards barbarianism and conflict. And so, it's like, that's why I say a lot of these, degenerate lifestyles should be shunned. They should be absolutely disincentivized. And I think that's where I'm going to stop for today. My voice is getting tired, but we'll pick up again at with this as Hans Hoppe's Getting Libertarianism Right. And we are still in the introduction, and we have quite a lot left, and my voice is running out. And wow, that's a lot. All right. We will get to this next time. And thank you for tuning into Popular Liberty. Again, please, check out Paloma Verde CBD for all your CBD needs, and use promo code POPULAR for 25% off your order over $75 and free shipping. And again, I do recommend the strawberry lemonade gummies. These are my favorite. I take 2 to 3 of them per day. And, you should too. All right. Take care.